My friends, hear me today. The greatest battles in your life are not taking place around you. They are taking place within you. The storms that threaten your destiny are not the storms in the world. They are the storms in your soul. And if you do not learn to master what is happening inside, you will always be controlled by what is happening outside. You were never created to be a slave to your emotions. You were never designed to be dragged through life by reactions, impulses, and feelings. God did not form you to be tossed to and fro by the mood of the moment or the pressure of the environment. You were created to rule. You were created to lead. You were created to govern, beginning with yourself. But we are living in a generation that has confused feeling with leadership, reaction with reality, emotion with identity. The culture teaches you to follow your heart, but the heart without discipline becomes a dictator. The culture says, speak your mind, but the untrained mind becomes a minefield. And if you are not careful, you will spend your entire life reacting to things that do not even deserve your attention. Listen carefully. Emotional instability is one of the most common ways people lose their destiny. Not because they lack talent, not because they lack opportunity, but because they lack control. They lose influence because they could not control their responses. They lose relationships because they could not govern their reactions. They lose peace because they gave people access to places God never gave them authority to enter. You must understand something. The world you live in is designed to provoke you. Media provokes you. Social platforms provoke you. Relationships provoke you. Institutions provoke you. Circumstances provoke you. Everywhere you turn, someone is trying to pull a reaction out of you. Why? Because the moment you react without intention, you give away your power. The moment you respond without purpose, you surrender your authority. Anybody can control your emotions, can control your decisions. Anybody can control your decisions, can control your destiny. And God never gave your destiny to people, He gave it to you. So today, we must confront a hard truth. Many of us are not being controlled by others. We are being controlled by what others can trigger in us. It is not the person, it is the ungoverned emotion. It is not the situation, it is the unmanaged reaction. This is why so many people live in cycles of conflict, fear, frustration, and regret. Not because life is against them, but because they have never been taught how to govern the inner world. But hear me. Emotional instability is not a personality problem. It is a leadership problem. It is a violation of the kingdom order of man. God designed you to dominion over the earth, but dominion begins with the territory of your own soul. Before you can manage resources, you must manage reactions. Before you can lead others, you must lead yourself. Before you can govern circumstances, you must govern your own spirit. This is why the enemy does not need to destroy you. He only needs to distract you. He only needs to offend you. He only needs to provoke you. Because if he can control your emotional state, he can sabotage your spiritual authority. But today, I'm going to show you something powerful. You can take your emotions back. You can take your peace back. You can take your authority back. You can become unmanipulable, unshakable, and unmoved, not by becoming cold or distant, but by becoming governed, disciplined, and anchored in kingdom principle. God built you to rule your feelings, not to be ruled by them. And if you will hear this teaching, if you will take these principles into your spirit, your life will cross a line you will never return from. Because emotional control kingdom, emotional control will make you untouchable to manipulation. Today is the beginning of a new kind of strength. Today is the beginning of a new kind of peace. Today is the day you stop being reactive and start being responsible, intentional, and purposeful. Now, let us move deeper. Now, let me take you a little deeper. Because emotional manipulation is not what most people think it is. Many believe people are controlling them. Many think society is controlling them. Many assume the enemy is controlling them. But hear me carefully. No one can control you unless they can activate something inside you. Manipulation does not begin with the manipulator. It begins with unmanaged emotions. This is why the wisest man who ever lived wrote, "A man without self-control is like a city whose walls are broken down." When your emotional walls are broken, anybody can walk in. Anybody can influence you. Anybody can push you. Anybody can provoke you. And the most dangerous part is this: you won't even know it's happening, because the battle is not external, the battle is internal. Let me explain. People don't manipulate you, they manipulate your reactions. They press a button and you respond. They whisper a word and you collapse. They withdraw approval and you panic. They give a comment and you break. But it is not the person. The person is only touching a wound that you have not healed, a fear you have not confronted, a belief you have not challenged, an emotion you have not governed. So the real enemy is not the pressure, it is the internal vulnerability. You cannot be manipulated by something outside until something inside has been left unmanaged. And this is why emotional instability is so dangerous. It gives the world the remote control to your life. You must understand this. If someone can predict your reaction, they can control your decision. If they can control your decision, they can control your destiny. And if they can control your destiny, they can silence your purpose. This is why the kingdom never trains believers to become emotionally driven. The kingdom trains believers to become principle driven. Emotion reacts, principle responds. Emotion is immediate, principle is intentional. Emotion is based on feeling. Principle is based on truth. Emotion fluctuates with the moment. Principle stands firm through the ages. You are not meant to live by what you feel. You are meant to live by what is true. Let me say this clearly. It is impossible to manipulate a person who knows who they are. Identity is immunity. Purpose is protection. Self-governance is spiritual armor. Most emotional manipulation succeeds because people do not know their own value. They do not understand their assignment. They have not established internal boundaries. They have not developed emotional discipline. So anyone with confidence, pressure, or opinion can redirect their path. My friends, you must hear this. Your emotional reactions reveal the areas of your life where the enemy still has access. Your emotional reactions reveal the places where people can still influence your decision making. Your emotional reactions reveal the gaps in your self-leadership. And this is why the kingdom focuses on inner transformation. God's priority has always been to develop the inner man before he releases the outer assignment. Before he gives you responsibility, he demands stability. Before he gives you influence, he demands governance. Before he gives you visibility, he demands maturity. Because if you are not mature internally, you will be manipulated externally. So today, I want you to take responsibility for this truth. Your emotions are not someone else's job. They are your leadership territory. Your heart is your territory. Your peace is your territory. Your reactions are your territory. And your destiny depends on how well you govern the territory of your own soul. Now that we understand that manipulation begins within, not outside, let us move into the first major kingdom principle that gives you emotional dominion. Now that you understand emotional manipulation does not begin outside of you, but inside of you, let us go deeper into the roots of emotional instability. Because you cannot fix what you will not identify, and you cannot govern what you will not confront. Emotional instability is not random. It has sources. It has origins. It has reasons. And if you will allow the Holy Spirit to illuminate these sources today, you will begin to sever the very roots that have been feeding your reactions, your frustrations, your overthinking, and your emotional exhaustion. My friends, there are three major sources of emotional instability, and every one of them is a leadership issue. Let us address them one by one. One, identity. Confusion when you don't know who you are. The first source is identity confusion. Listen carefully. Any area of your life where your identity is not secure becomes an entry point for emotional instability. When you do not know who you are, you will allow others to tell you who you are. When you are unsure of your value, you will give people the power to measure it. When you do not know your worth, you will let circumstances dictate it. And the moment your identity becomes negotiable, your emotions become vulnerable. Identity anchors the soul. Identity stabilizes reactions. Identity protects you from emotional storms. This is why the enemy's first attack against humanity was identity. Did God really say? Who told you that? Because if you doubt who you are, you will question everything you do. If you doubt who you are, you will react to everything around you. If you doubt who you are, you will be shaped by every voice except God's. Identity confusion is emotional instability at its foundation. 2. Purpose disconnection. When you don't know why you are here. The second source is purpose disconnection. Let me tell you something. When a person does not know their purpose, everything becomes an emotional event. Everything feels personal. Everything becomes urgent. Everything becomes overwhelming. Everything becomes offensive. Why? Because without purpose, you have no filter. You have no focus. You have no guiding star. You have no standard by which to measure what deserves your reaction and what does not. People without purpose live emotionally scattered. People with purpose live emotionally centered. Purpose simplifies your life. Purpose clarifies your decisions. Purpose neutralizes unnecessary reactions. When you are disconnected from your purpose, you become available to distractions. You become vulnerable to people's opinions. You become sensitive to criticism. You become reactive to pressure. You become governed by every shift in your environment. But when you know your purpose, everything changes. You begin to see what matters and what does not. You begin to invest your emotional energy wisely. You begin to ignore foolishness. You begin to outgrow pettiness. You begin to protect your peace like it is a kingdom asset, because it is. Purpose stabilizes the soul. 3. Disorder in the soul when your inner world is untrained. The third source of emotional instability is disorder within the soul. Your soul, your mind, your will, and your emotions must be trained. Hear me. If the soul is not trained, the emotions will reign. And emotions were never designed to reign. They were designed to report. When your soul is unorganized, unstructured, and undisciplined, emotions become loud, dominant, and deceptive. The mind begins to exaggerate threats. The heart begins to overreact. The will begins to collapse under pressure. This internal disorder becomes external dysfunction. This is why so many people cry easily, argue easily, get offended easily, worry easily, and panic quickly, because the internal world has never been brought under kingdom alignment. You cannot be emotionally stable when your mind is unrenewed. You cannot be emotionally consistent when your habits are undisciplined. You cannot be emotionally anchored when your spiritual life is neglected. Myles Munroe often said, self-leadership is the highest form of leadership. And self-leadership begins with inner order. Your spirit must lead, your mind must follow, and your emotions must obey. When that order is reversed, instability becomes normal. But remember, normal does not mean kingdom. So today, you must confront these 3 areas. Who am I? Why am I here? Is my inner world aligned and governed? Because if you do not address identity, purpose, and inner order, your emotions will continue to rule where you were appointed to reign. Now that we understand the 3 roots of instability, let us move to the first major kingdom principle that transforms emotional chaos into emotional authority. Now that we have identified the roots of emotional instability, identity, confusion, purpose, disconnection, and disorder in the soul, we must move into the kingdom principles that restore emotional dominion. And the first principle is foundational. It is the bedrock of all emotional maturity. If you misunderstand this principle, nothing else will work. Principle has shown, emotions are servants, not masters. Let me say it again so it enters your spirit. Your emotions were created to serve you, not to rule you. One of the greatest violations of creation is when something designed to be a servant becomes a master. Whenever the order of authority in life is reversed, abuse becomes inevitable. Abuse of time, abuse of relationships, abuse of opportunities, abuse of destiny. Emotional disorder is not simply unhealthy, it is a violation of kingdom structure. Listen carefully. God did not design human beings to be led by emotion. Emotions were designed to be indicators, not dictators. Emotions were designed to be signals, not steering wheels. Emotions were designed to communicate, not command. The moment emotions begin to instruct your decisions, direct your relationships, dictate your reactions, and define your identity, you are living outside of the order God established. You were designed to live by principle, not by feeling. You were designed to live by purpose, not by impulse. You were designed to live by spirit, not by emotion. Let me teach you the kingdom hierarchy of internal authority. If you understand this, you will understand everything. Spirit, the God-conscious part of you. Mind, the self-conscious part of you. Body, the world-conscious part of you. Emotions, the interpreters of experience. Watch this. Emotions are number 4. They were never intended to be number 1. When emotions take the place of the spirit, you lose divine direction. When emotions take the place of the mind, you lose sound judgment. When emotions take the place of discipline, you lose self-governance. When emotions take the place of purpose, you lose destiny. Most people are emotionally unstable, not because they are weak, but because their internal authority structure has been reversed. They are living from the bottom up instead of the top down. The emotions sit on the throne, while the spirit remains unemployed. And where the spirit is unemployed, the soul becomes chaotic. That is why the book of wisdom reminds us, he who rules his spirit is greater than one who conquers a city. Why? Because ruling your spirit means ruling your whole internal hierarchy, your thoughts, your feelings, your impulses, your desires, your responses. Emotional mastery begins with spiritual leadership. Hear me, you cannot lead your emotions until your spirit leads you. This is why the cross is significant. The cross is not only about salvation, it is about restoring internal order. God is not only saving your soul, he is returning the government of your life to its rightful source, your spirit, empowered by his spirit. When your emotions become your master, you will live a life of reaction, and reaction is the lowest form of living. Reaction hands power to people. Reaction gives the world the ability to control your mood, your decisions, your confidence, and your peace. Reaction makes you a prisoner of circumstances. But when you place emotions back into the position of a servant, life begins to align. You begin to respond instead of react. You begin to think before you act. You begin to pause before you speak. You begin to evaluate before you engage. You begin to choose actions that align with purpose rather than impulses that sabotage purpose. Let me give you something practical. Every time you feel an emotion rising, fear, anger, jealousy, irritation, frustration, say this to yourself: you are reporting to me. You are not ruling me. That one sentence can save your relationships. That one sentence can protect your future. That one sentence can prevent you from making decisions you cannot undo. You see, emotions are like employees. They give you information about the environment. They tell you something is wrong. They tell you something is unsafe. They tell you something needs attention. But employees do not run the company. They do not make the decisions. They do not determine the vision. They do not have the authority to redirect the mission. Emotions are messengers, not managers. So when a thought comes that says they disrespected, you react. That is only a message. When the feeling says you should panic, this is too much, that is only a message. When an impulse says say it, now don't think, that is only a message. You are the CEO. Your spirit is the chairman. Your purpose is the mission. Your emotions are the staff, and the staff does not make decisions. This kingdom principle alone, if you master it, will elevate your life above manipulation. No one can manipulate a person whose emotions have been placed in their rightful position. Manipulators rely on emotional chaos. But when you are governed, when you are steady, when you are anchored, they lose access. Now let us move to the next principle, where emotional mastery becomes anchored in purpose. Now that we've established that emotions are servants, not masters, it is time to understand the force that gives those servants their assignment. Because emotions do not simply need control, they need direction. They must be trained, yes. They must be governed, absolutely. But most importantly, they must be aligned with something greater than themselves. And that something is your purpose. Hear me carefully. Purpose is the master filter of all human emotion. Purpose decides what deserves a reaction. Purpose decides what deserves your energy. Purpose decides what deserves your time. Purpose decides what deserves your peace. Purpose decides what deserves your attention. When purpose is unclear, emotions become unrestrained. When purpose is unknown, emotions become unfiltered. When purpose is forgotten, emotions become exaggerated. When purpose is abandoned, emotions become destructive. You are not emotionally overwhelmed because life is too heavy. You are emotionally overwhelmed because your purpose is too blurry. When you do not know why you are here, everything becomes personal. Every comment becomes a wound. Every disagreement becomes a battle. Every mistake becomes a crisis. Every delay feels like rejection. Every setback feels like a verdict. Why? Because without purpose, there is no mechanism to evaluate the importance of events. Everything feels big when your purpose feels small. But when you know your purpose, when your assignment becomes clear, when your calling becomes defined, your emotional life begins to organize itself. Purpose becomes the lens that tells you what matters and what does not. Let me tell you something powerful. Purpose shrinks the size of unnecessary emotions. You start realizing, this argument is not part of my assignment. This accusation is not part of my mission. This offense is not part of my destiny. This person's opinion is not part of my purpose. This fight does not contribute to my calling. Purpose removes you from emotional battles that do not belong to you. This is why Jesus could walk through criticism, betrayal, rejection, misunderstanding, opposition, and loneliness and stay emotionally steady. It wasn't because he lacked emotion. No, he wept. He felt compassion. He felt anger. He felt sorrow. Jesus was fully emotional, but never emotionally led. Why? Because he would say, for this cause I came. Purpose controlled his responses. Purpose governed his reactions. Purpose filtered his emotions. Myles Munroe taught this repeatedly. When the purpose of a thing is unknown, abuse is inevitable. That includes the abuse of your emotions. If you do not know the purpose of your life, you will misuse your emotional energy. You will place passion in the wrong place. You will place anger in the wrong place. You will place fear in the wrong place. You will place love in the wrong place. You will place loyalty in the wrong place. You will place trust in the wrong place. And when your emotional investment is misplaced, your emotional pain becomes multiplied. Purpose becomes the master organizer, the divine filter, the emotional firewall that protects your peace and your focus. Let me make this extremely practical. Before you respond to anything, ask yourself 3 simple purpose-based questions. 1, does this matter to my assignment? If it does not contribute to your future, it does not deserve your reaction today. 2, is this worth the emotional energy I'm about to spend? Emotion is a currency. Do not spend it cheaply. 3, will this bring me closer to the person I am becoming? If your reaction does not align with your future, it is an enemy to your progress. When you begin filtering every emotion through purpose, emotional stability becomes automatic. You no longer react from your feelings, you respond from your assignment. You no longer respond based on your mood, you respond based on your mission. You no longer live from impulse, you live from intention. Purpose produces emotional maturity. Purpose produces emotional clarity. Purpose produces emotional strength. Now that we understand that purpose is the master filter, we can move to the next principle. One of the most powerful truths in emotional control. The power of an unreactive spirit. Now that we understand the purpose that governs emotions, we must address the posture that sustains emotional control. The unreactive spirit. This is one of the most powerful qualities of kingdom leadership. It is the hallmark of maturity. It is the sign of true inner governance. And it is one of the greatest threats to manipulation. Hear me. The strongest person in any environment is the one who cannot be provoked. Not because they are passive. Not because they are indifferent. Not because they are numb. But because they are spiritually governed. An unreactive spirit is not an empty spirit. It is a disciplined spirit. A discerning spirit. A purpose-led spirit. A spirit in alignment with the government of God inside them. When you develop an unreactive spirit, you become emotionally untouchable, not by being cold, but by being controlled, not by being hardened, but by being anchored. Let me explain something very important. Reacting is a sign of emotional weakness. Responding is a sign of spiritual strength. Reaction requires no thought, no wisdom, no discipline, and no leadership. Anyone can react. But it takes intentionality, self-government, and spiritual clarity to pause, to observe, to understand, and then respond. This is why Jesus was never reactive. When people accused him, he remained silent. When they tried to provoke him, he answered with principle. When they tried to trap him, he responded with wisdom. When they demanded urgency, he walked in purpose. When the storm raged, he slept. He was not moved by the environment. He moved the environment. An unreactive spirit is the highest form of emotional authority. Let me give you a kingdom revelation. Your reaction reveals who has power over you. When someone can agitate your mind, they govern your peace. When someone can activate your anger, they influence your behavior. When someone can disturb your calm, they interrupt your purpose. You cannot rule what triggers you. You cannot lead what disturbs you. You cannot influence what upsets you. This is why emotional control is not optional for kingdom people. It is mandatory. You cannot fulfill your assignment if anything and anyone can pull you out of alignment. Listen to me. Your calmness is spiritual armor. Your silence is spiritual strategy. Your composure is spiritual warfare. A calm spirit confuses your enemies. A calm spirit frustrates manipulators. A calm spirit protects your thinking. A calm spirit sharpens your discernment. A calm spirit safeguards your purpose. Some enemies don't attack to win, they attack to provoke. Because if they can provoke you, they don't need to defeat you. You will defeat yourself. This is why the Bible instructs us to guard the heart. The heart is the seat of your reactions. The heart is the source of your emotions. The heart is the trigger point of destiny decisions. If your heart is not guarded, your reactions become public access. If your heart is unguarded, your purpose becomes vulnerable. If your heart is ungoverned, your destiny becomes negotiable. So how do you cultivate an unreactive spirit? Let me give you the kingdom process. 1. The pause. Before you respond to anything, pause. Pausing is not weakness, it is leadership. Pausing allows the spirit to take the throne before the emotion takes the stage. 2. The perception. Ask yourself, what is really happening here? Is it pressure? Is it manipulation? Is it misunderstanding? Most emotional battles are misinterpreted ones. 3. The principle. Respond from truth, not from feeling. Ask, what does wisdom demand? What does purpose require? That pause, that perception, that principle is what transforms emotional chaos into emotional authority. Let me tell you something life-changing. Your power is not in reacting. Your power is in choosing when and whether to respond. A reactive person is easy to predict. A reactive person is easy to manipulate. A reactive person is easy to disarm. A reactive person is easy to provoke. But an unreactive person is a mystery. An unreactive person is powerful. An unreactive person is stable. An unreactive person is dangerous. Dangerous to the plans of the enemy. Dangerous to manipulation. Dangerous to chaos. Because nothing moves them except purpose. Nothing shakes them except God. Nothing governs them except the Spirit. Now that we understand the power of the unreactive spirit, let us go deeper into the levels of true emotional dominion. If you are going to master your emotions, you must understand that emotional dominion is not a gift, it is a process. It does not happen in a moment, it develops in stages. You do not wake up emotionally mature. You grow into emotional maturity through intentional alignment with kingdom order. There are 4 levels of emotional dominion. And every human being on earth is living in one of these 4 levels. The level you occupy determines your stability, your relationships, your influence, and your destiny. Today, I want you to identify where you are and where God is calling you to rise. Level 1, reaction. The lowest form of emotional existence. This is where most people live. They do not act, they react. They do not lead their emotions lead them. They do not choose responses choose them. Reaction is instinctual. Reaction is impulsive. Reaction is childish. Reaction is unfiltered. A reactive person is controlled by circumstances, people, moods, pressures, opinions, emotions. If someone disrespects them, they explode. If someone disappoints them, they collapse. If someone ignores them, they lash out. If something goes wrong, they panic. Their emotions run ahead of their purpose. You cannot build a destiny from level 1. You cannot maintain relationships from level 1. You cannot lead nations, families, companies, ministries, or even yourself at level 1. Reaction is emotional slavery. Level 2, suppression. Control without transformation. Most people think emotional suppression is strength, but it is not. Suppression is simply hiding the storm, not calming it. It is silent turmoil. It is controlled chaos. It is internal noise with external stillness. You look disciplined on the outside, but inside, anger is boiling. You smile publicly, but privately you explode. You speak softly, but your soul is loud with frustration. Suppression is dangerous because pressure always demands expression. Whatever you suppress eventually leaks out, bursts out, or wears you out. Suppression may be socially acceptable, but it is spiritually unhealthy. God does not want you to suppress emotions. He wants you to master them. Level 3, management. The beginning of true governance. This is where emotional maturity begins. Management means you recognize your emotions without being ruled by them. You acknowledge feelings without surrendering to them. You choose your responses. You govern your impulses. You act with intention, not instinct. Emotionally managed people say, I feel this, but I will not follow it. I am angry, but I will not sin. I am afraid, but I will move forward. I am hurt, but I will not retaliate. Management is the first step into kingdom level living. It is where your spirit begins to reclaim the throne. It is where your purpose begins to lead your emotions rather than your emotions leading your purpose. This is where most mature individuals spend their lives, but this is still not the highest level. Level 4, dominion. Emotions that serve purpose. This is the level of emotional leadership. This is the level of Jesus. This is the level of the kingdom. This is the level God designed for you. At this level, emotions respond to your assignment. At this level, emotions follow your purpose. At this level, emotions serve your vision. At this level, emotions obey your spirit. You no longer waste emotional energy on things that do not matter. You no longer get provoked by small-minded people. You no longer get shaken by temporary storms. You no longer get manipulated by emotional traps. At the level of dominion, you feel emotions, but emotions no longer define you. You use emotions, but emotions no longer use you. You master emotions, but emotions no longer master you. Let me show you what dominion looks like. When anger comes, you channel it toward righteous change. When fear comes, you convert it into wisdom. When sadness comes, you turn it into reflection and growth. When joy comes, you multiply it through gratitude. When pressure comes, you turn it into purpose-driven momentum. Your emotions become tools, not threats. They become servants, not saboteurs. They become instruments of destiny, not instruments of destruction. Dominion is the emotional posture of kings. Dominion is the emotional posture of leaders. Dominion is the emotional posture of those who transform the earth. This is where God wants you. This is where purpose requires you. This is where greatness demands you to stand. Now that we understand the levels, we must explore the fundamental shift that empowers this transformation, the transformation of identity itself. If you want to step into emotional dominion, you cannot simply change your habits, you must change your identity. Because emotional control is not first a skill, it is an identity shift. It is not only about managing behavior, it is about redefining who you are at the deepest level of your being. You cannot behave differently until you believe differently. And you cannot believe differently until you see yourself differently. Many people remain emotional reactors because they have never upgraded the internal picture of themselves. They see themselves as fragile, so they act fragile. They see themselves as victims, so they think like victims. They see themselves as powerless, so they react powerlessly. Hear this truth. You will always act according to the identity you have accepted. If you identify yourself as someone easily offended, you will constantly be offended. If you see yourself as someone who can't control their emotions, you will live reacting to everything. If you see yourself as someone with a temper, you will excuse your outbursts. If you see yourself as someone who is just sensitive, you will permit emotional instability. Your actions always bow to your identity. But when God wants to elevate you, He does not start with your habits, He starts with your identity. Before He changes your behavior, He redefines your being. Before He adjusts your lifestyle, He restores your likeness. This is why Scripture says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Transformation begins in identity, not in activity. You see, emotional reactors say, I can't help how I feel. I'm just like this. This is who I am. My emotions control me. I've always been this way. But emotional leaders say, I govern my soul. My spirit takes the lead. I choose my response. I am responsible for my emotions. I am designed to rule, not react. It is not arrogance, it is alignment. It is not ego, it is identity. It is not denial, it is kingdom order. Let me teach you a profound principle. Identity creates authority. If you see yourself as a child tossed by emotions, you will submit to them. But if you see yourself as a leader of your inner world, emotions will submit to you. You cannot rule what you believe is above you. You cannot lead what you believe is stronger than you. You cannot control what you believe defines you. So how does your identity transform from reactor to leader? Let me give you the kingdom pathway. 1. Recognize who you are in the kingdom. You are not an emotional creature trying to become spiritual. You are a spiritual creature learning to govern emotions. You are made in the image of God. God is not reactive. God is not impulsive. God is not emotionally unstable. God is calm, intentional, wise, and sovereign. And you were created to function like Him. When you understand this, you realize losing control is not natural for you. Overreacting is not normal for you. Emotional chaos is not your original design. You were designed for dominion, starting with dominion over yourself. 2. Reject the old identity of reactivity. You must consciously renounce the emotional labels you have lived under. Labels like hot-headed, overly emotional, easily triggered, unpredictable, sensitive, moody, impulsive. These are not your kingdom identity. These are trauma identities. These are childhood identities. These are cultural identities. These are inherited identities. These are survival identities. But they are not God's identity for you. Until you reject the false identity, you cannot embrace the true one. 3. Receive the identity of an emotional leader. This is where everything changes. You declare not as a confession of desire, but as an affirmation of design. I am a leader of my emotions. I govern my inner world. My spirit rules my reactions. I respond with wisdom, not impulse. I make decisions from purpose, not pain. Identity is not a feeling, it is a decision. You don't wait to feel like an emotional leader. You decide you are one, and your emotions learn to follow. 4. Reinforce the identity through action. Every time you pause before reacting, you reinforce your leadership. Every time you choose silence over impulse, you reinforce your authority. Every time you respond with purpose instead of emotion, you strengthen your identity. Identity is built through repetition. You become who you repeatedly decide to be. Your emotions begin learning a new order. I am not in charge. I am not the leader. I am not the authority. I serve the purpose. I do not direct it. This is emotional transformation. Not suppression, not denial, not pretend control, but true kingdom alignment. 5. Renew the mind until the new identity feels natural. The goal is not to act like an emotional leader, it is to become one. Where wisdom becomes instinct, where calm becomes normal, where composure becomes automatic, where purpose becomes your first response. This is the level where emotional dominion becomes effortless, not because the emotions disappear, but because they have learned who is in charge. When identity transforms, emotions fall into place. Now that your identity has shifted, we must deal with the architectural structure that holds emotional dominion together, the discipline of the pause. One of the greatest marks of emotional maturity and one of the greatest weapons of kingdom leadership is the discipline of the pause. The pause is not simply waiting. It is not hesitation. It is not fear. It is power. Hear me. The pause is spiritual authority in slow motion. It is the moment where wisdom replaces impulse. It is a space where purpose replaces pressure. It is the gap where the spirit takes the throne before the emotion takes control. Most people ruin relationships, opportunities, reputations, and futures because they do not understand the power of a delayed reaction. They think responding immediately is strength. But in kingdom living, immediate reactions are usually emotional, and emotional reactions are usually costly. A reactive person is predictable. A reactive person is vulnerable. A reactive person is easily manipulated. A reactive person is controlled by external forces. But a person who pauses is dangerous because you cannot manipulate someone who pauses. You cannot provoke someone who pauses. You cannot confuse someone who pauses. You cannot dominate someone who pauses. The pause is the moment where you reclaim your internal government. Let me explain the kingdom law behind this. The pause breaks the dominance of emotion by giving time for the spirit to speak. Your emotions speak first. Your impulses speak quickly. Your frustrations speak loudly. But your spirit speaks quietly and wisely. You need silence to hear it. You need stillness to sense it. You need space to follow it. This is why Scripture often commands, be still. Because stillness is where spiritual clarity emerges. Stillness is where divine perspective appears. Stillness is where emotional chaos becomes spiritual calm. Most people's greatest regrets were born in moments where they refused to pause. If you had paused before you sent that text, if you had paused before you said those words, if you had paused before you made that decision, if you had paused before you reacted to that insult, if you had paused before you followed that impulse, your life, your relationships, your peace would look very different today. Let me teach you something profound. The pause protects you from permanent decisions made in temporary emotions. You must never make a promise in excitement, a decision in anger, a conclusion in fear, a judgment in insecurity, or a reaction in offense. Pause until the emotion subsides and the purpose rises. People often say, I couldn't help myself. Yes, you could. You simply didn't pause. Emotional mastery is not about suppressing feelings. It is about interrupting them long enough to interpret them. The pause gives you time to ask critical kingdom questions. 1. What is really happening here? Most emotional reactions are misinterpretations. 2. Is this situation attacking me or triggering something in me? Sometimes the problem is not the event, but the wound. 3. What response aligns with my purpose? Your future is the highest judge of your present behavior. 4. What would wisdom do here? Wisdom seldom moves quickly. 5. Will this matter in 1 day, 1 year, 1 decade? Most emotional storms lose their power under the pressure of perspective. Let me give you the truth. The pause is not passive. The pause is purposeful. The pause is the birthplace of strategy. The pause is the workshop of discipline. The pause is the shield of peace. The pause is the protection of destiny. Even God uses the pause. Before creation, He hovered. Before speaking, He observed. Before acting, He evaluated. And you are made in His image. The pause is your divine inheritance. Let me describe what happens spiritually when you pause. Your emotional energy decreases. Your cognitive clarity increases. Your spiritual sensitivity heightens. Your discernment sharpens. Your reaction transforms into response. Your impulse converts into intention. Your authority becomes visible. When people cannot predict your reactions, they cannot control your actions. When people cannot provoke you emotionally, they cannot divert you purposefully. When people cannot pull you out of your pause, they cannot pull you out of your destiny. Hear me well. Delayed reaction is not delay, it is dominion. You are not slowing down, you are rising up. You are not hesitating, you are evaluating. You are not retreating, you are governing. That pause can save marriages. That pause can rescue friendships. That pause can prevent breakdowns. That pause can protect reputations. That pause can preserve destinies. Because the pause is the moment where you choose who you will be. A reactor of emotion or a leader of purpose. And once you master the pause, you are ready to learn the inner architecture that sustains it, the emotional intelligence of the kingdom. Now that you understand the discipline of the pause, the spiritual power of delayed reaction, we must talk about the inner framework that makes all of this sustainable. Because emotional mastery is not simply about resisting reactions, it is about understanding your emotions, interpreting their purpose, and redirecting their energy toward destiny. This is what the world calls emotional intelligence. But in the kingdom, we call it emotional wisdom, the divine ability to discern the message behind your feelings, align them with purpose, and use them as resources instead of threats. Hear me. Emotions are not your enemy. Misunderstood emotions are. Emotions are not the problem. Misinterpreted emotions are. Emotions are not dangerous. Untrained emotions are. God gave you emotions not to weaken you, but to guide you. Not to sabotage you, but to signal you. Not to control you, but to inform you. But you must understand the language of your emotions if you want to lead them. Because every emotion carries meaning. Every emotion carries information. Every emotion reveals something happening in your soul, your spirit, your relationships, or your environment. Emotional intelligence. Step 1, understanding the source of the emotion. Before you respond, before you speak, before you act, you must ask, where did this emotion come from? Because emotions do not appear randomly, they have origins. Some emotions come from perception, the way you interpret an event. Some come from memory, old wounds activated by new experiences. Some come from fear, the imagination, running ahead of faith. Some come from insecurity, a false identity, reacting to imagined threats. Some come from truth, the Spirit alerting you to danger, injustice, or purpose. Some come from purpose, divine agitation, pushing you to change. If you don't know the source, you will misdiagnose the solution. Emotional intelligence, step 2, interpreting the message of the emotion. Every emotion is a messenger. But what is it trying to say? Anger may be saying something you value is threatened. Fear may be saying you're stepping into the unknown. Trust God. Sadness may be saying you need to release something. Jealousy may be saying there is an undeveloped part of you longing to grow. Anxiety may be saying your mind is living in the future instead of the present. Your emotions are speaking, but wisdom is required to interpret their voice. Misinterpretation is what causes emotional chaos. You think someone attacked you when your emotion was actually pointing to a wound you never healed. You think someone rejected you when it was actually your fear of inadequacy talking. You think the situation is dangerous when it's simply unfamiliar. You cannot respond accurately if you do not interpret correctly. Emotional intelligence. Step 3, redirecting the energy of the emotion. This is where emotional maturity becomes emotional leadership. Every emotion carries energy, and that energy must either be released, expressed, or redirected. Unwise people release emotionally. Immature people express emotionally. But kingdom people redirect emotionally. Let me explain. Anger becomes power when directed toward change. Fear becomes wisdom when directed toward preparation. Frustration becomes vision when directed toward improvement. Sadness becomes depth when directed toward reflection. Passion becomes purpose when directed toward calling. Your emotions are energy. Energy is fuel. Fuel can burn down a house or it can power a city. It depends on who directs it. Emotion is not something to escape. Emotion is something to aim. When you channel your emotions toward purpose, you take authority over them. You transform what once weakened you into what now strengthens you. The 3 questions of kingdom emotional intelligence. Whenever you experience a strong emotion, ask, what is this emotion telling me? Understand the message. Why is it affecting me this way? Interpret the meaning. How can I use this emotion for God's purpose? Redirect the energy. These 3 questions alone will save you from 80% of unnecessary conflict, drama, pain, and self-sabotage. The kingdom goal. Emotions under the government of the Spirit. The goal is not emotional suppression. The goal is spiritual governance, where your emotions become instruments in the hands of your purpose, where feelings no longer dictate your faith, where moods no longer distort your mission, where impulses no longer sabotage your identity, where triggers no longer control your destiny. Hear this final truth. Emotional control is not a personality trait, it is a kingdom requirement. You cannot fulfill your assignment without it. You cannot build healthy relationships without it. You cannot lead anyone, including yourself, without it. You cannot enter your destiny without mastering your internal world. The Bible says, above all else, guard your heart. Why? Because the heart is where emotions live. And whatever controls the heart controls the life. You guard your heart not by avoiding emotions, but by governing emotions. You guard your heart by pausing before reacting, thinking before speaking, understanding before judging, aligning before responding. This is emotional intelligence in the kingdom. It is not secular self-help. It is spiritual self-government. It is leadership starting from within. It is dominion beginning in the soul. You were created to lead the earth. But before God gives you nations, He gives you yourself. And if you cannot govern your emotions, you cannot govern your future. But if you master them, if you lead them, if you align them, you become unstoppable. Your peace becomes unshakable. Your purpose becomes undeniable. Your decisions become unmanipulable. Your spirit becomes immovable. Your destiny becomes inevitable. This is the power of emotional mastery. This is the life of kingdom leadership. This is the transformation God intended for you.